Just one quick check. The tab opens, the message gets answered, and the thought you were holding no longer has a handle. You return to the document, but not to the exact mind that left it. That small blank space is where a much larger verdict often appears. My attention is ruined. I cannot read anymore. I used to have discipline. Something in me has been permanently shortened by the way I live now. Then an inconvenient contradiction arrives. The same person who cannot finish 2 pages may spend 90 minutes repairing a bike or arranging a playlist. A game or one particular conversation can make the clock disappear. So the useful question is not, do I still possess attention? Clearly, some version of it is available. The question is why access feels effortless in one room and nearly impossible in another. And keep one moment in view, the first urge to switch. It usually feels like evidence that focus has already failed. There is a hidden cost in reading it that way. By the end, the urge will become the most useful part of the pattern. The opening verdict begins in the wrong place. Your attention may feel broken, while the mechanism that selects, protects, and redirects it is doing exactly what a cue-rich environment repeatedly asks it to do. You may have heard that attention now lasts 47 seconds. That number came from observing how long people remained on one screen before switching in particular digital settings. It was an average of screen behavior, not a universal stopwatch installed in every human brain. That distinction matters. Measuring when someone changes screens tells you what happened in that environment. It does not reveal that person's maximum attention. A conversation and a drawing make one set of demands. Driving or an emergency makes another. An average also compresses long and short episodes, different tasks, different people, and different moments into one number. It can describe a pattern worth taking seriously without becoming a diagnosis for the person reading it. Even the word attention hides different jobs. Selecting one signal, sustaining effort, noticing a change, and returning after interruption are related but not identical demands. Struggling with one does not automatically establish that every part of the system is weak. The first mechanism is less dramatic and more useful. Switching has a cost. In controlled experiments, people took longer when alternating between tasks, especially when the rules were more complex, even when they knew a switch was coming. Because changing task is not merely moving your eyes, the mind has to release one goal, retrieve another, and activate the rules that make the new action correct. That rebuilding can be brief and still happen dozens of times. Think of it as an invisible reload. Email asks what is urgent and who needs an answer. A budget asks which numbers belong together. Writing asks what the next sentence must accomplish. The screen changed instantly. The rule set did not. When you return to the paragraph, the words are still there, but the internal position is gone. You were not only on line 6, you were carrying a question, a tone, a half-rejected phrase, and the direction of the next idea. The blank return then gets interpreted as low ability. I cannot concentrate. Yet, failed concentration is not the whole experience. Part of it can be the cost of reconstructing context after an interruption. The second mechanism arrives before you touch anything. In an experiment, the sound or vibration of a phone notification disrupted performance on an attention-demanding task, even when participants did not interact with the phone. So, I ignored it does not always mean it had no effect. A cue can recruit orientation, raise a question, or keep a possible message active in the background. The hand stays still while attention negotiates with the possibility. A notification is like a doorbell in a room where every visitor might be your manager, your family, a delivery, a joke, or nothing. Refusing to open the door still requires deciding not to open it, and many switches do not need an alert. A remembered errand, a difficult sentence, or the possibility of a more rewarding tab can become its own doorbell. The environment teaches the route. Eventually, the mind can walk it unprompted. That helps explain why closing one app may not create instant peace. Repeated switching can become the expected rhythm of a work session. When the outside cue disappears, the next pause may supply an inside cue instead. The pattern continues without proving the capacity is gone. This is where the dramatic story usually takes over. Constant media multitasking has permanently damaged everyone's cognitive control. It is a clean sentence. The research record is not that clean. One influential study found that heavy media multitaskers were more vulnerable to irrelevant information and performed worse on some switching measures. That result mattered because it challenged the flattering idea that frequent multitaskers become unusually skilled at multitasking. Later replication studies and a meta-analysis found a weaker picture. Some effects did not repeat consistently, and the overall association became small and statistically uncertain after accounting for small study effects. The responsible conclusion is narrower. Rapid switching and notifications can disrupt performance in the moment, but a lifetime sentence about your permanently ruined attention requires stronger evidence than the internet usually offers. A major review of smartphones and cognition reached a similar caution. It found compelling results, but too little evidence for firm conclusions about broad, lasting cognitive consequences. Concern can be real, without certainty being invented. Now, return to the contradiction. If attention appears during a repair, a conversation, or a game, the capacity did not vanish. The conditions changed. The goal became clearer, feedback arrived faster, competing cues weakened, or the stakes became immediate. Deep absorption in one favored activity does not prove that every other difficulty is trivial. It simply prevents one bad context from being used as total evidence about you. The aim is not dismissal. It is a more accurate map of where access changes. This does not mean every difficult task should feel fascinating. It means the gap between contexts is information, not a moral verdict. I focus here but not there can guide design more accurately than I am a person with no focus. The broken attention story creates its own problem. If a blank return proves you are defective, difficult work begins with surveillance. Am I focused yet? Did I drift? How long has it been? Attention must now do the task and watch itself doing the task. Then the ordinary friction of beginning feels diagnostic. A dense paragraph, an uncertain decision, or 10 quiet seconds becomes proof that something is wrong. Switching offers immediate relief from both the task and the verdict attached to struggling with it. The new tab feels better for a moment, not necessarily because it is more meaningful, but because it ends uncertainty instantly. Repeating that relief can make the exit route familiar, especially when the original task has no clear next move. Because each individual switch seems tiny, the accumulated friction is easy to misread. By late afternoon, you do not think, I paid many transition costs. You think, my mind has stopped working. The mechanism disappears, leaving identity to take the blame. So the repair should not begin with a heroic promise to focus for 3 hours. Begin by reducing how often the mind must reload, renegotiate, and resist. Endurance becomes easier after the room stops repeatedly asking for transitions. First, make one next action visually dominant. Not work on presentation, but write the sentence that explains slide 3. A vague project contains many possible rules. A visible action gives attention somewhere specific to land. Second, silence non-essential alerts during the chosen interval. If practical, move the phone beyond reach or out of sight. This is not a purity ritual. It simply removes repeated negotiations that never belonged inside the task. Third, batch work that uses similar rules. Answer messages together, review numbers together, draft before formatting. The point is not worshiping a schedule. It is paying fewer invisible reload fees between incompatible mental jobs. The borders between tasks deserve special protection. Finish a thought before checking the queue when possible. Close one rule set, capture what remains open, then begin the next. A deliberate transition costs time too, but it leaves less context scattered behind you. Fourth, before an unavoidable interruption, Leave a return handle. Write one line. I was comparing these two options. Next, test the second assumption. That note preserves more than a page number. It preserves the question your mind was carrying. When you return, use the same small threshold. Read the note, reread the last two sentences, then continue. Consistency matters because it turns re-entry from a fresh decision into a familiar sequence. Set an interval short enough that you can keep the agreement and long enough to encounter friction. 20 minutes may work today. 12 may be more honest tomorrow. The number is a container, not a score of personal worth. For a week, count successful returns instead of perfect streaks. A drift noticed and redirected is not a ruined session. It is the skill itself in motion. This measure rewards recovery, which is available on ordinary days, not just flawless ones. Now the moment we held open, the first urge to switch. It is not proof that focus ended. It is often the point where novelty wore off, difficulty became visible, or the next action stopped being obvious. Instead of obeying the urge or fighting it theatrically, ask one question. What became difficult right before I wanted to leave? The answer may be boredom, uncertainty, fear of doing it badly, or a task that was never defined. Then stay for one concrete move. Read one more paragraph. Name the uncertain choice. Write the ugly first sentence. This is not endurance theater. It teaches the moment after the urge that departure is possible, not compulsory. If the urge returns every 30 seconds, do not turn the session into punishment. Check the room, the task definition, your fatigue, and whether the work can be divided. A pattern is useful data before it is a character judgment. And if attention problems are persistent across settings, significantly disrupt daily life, or arrive with other concerns, a qualified professional can help examine the larger picture. A video can offer a framework. It cannot perform that assessment. Your attention may not be a shattered object waiting for a perfect detox. It may be a capable system working inside a room with too many doorbells, too many rule changes, and too few handles for returning. That changes the first move. You do not have to prove that you can force an exhausted brain through an impossible afternoon. You can make the next action clearer, reduce the cues, preserve context, and practice crossing one urge without leaving. Just one quick check will still appear, but now it is not an order and not a verdict. It is a doorway. The hidden cost was mistaking that doorway for proof of damage. Now you can leave a handle or remain for one more honest move. The better measure of attention is not whether you never drift. Human attention moves. The better measure is whether you can recognize the conditions shaping that movement and build a reliable path back. That leaves a stranger question for the next room. When your mind keeps planning during rest, is it protecting your time or is it preventing you from ever arriving inside it?